Right, let's make a start. Thank you everybody for joining this very special webinar. We are delighted to be joined by two very special guests tonight. Thank you so much to Girls on Track UK and Motorsport UK for all of their help in organising this. Throughout the session, if you have any questions or you want to submit them, please do put them in the chat box and I'll read them out as we go along. This session is also going to be recorded, so you can watch it back on YouTube or across any other social media channels that it's posted on. So let's do some introductions. I am very, very happy to be joined by Valeria Loretti from Shell Motorsport and also Lucy Taylor from Castrol. So would you both like to introduce yourselves and tell me what your job descriptions are?
Great. Lucy, if you don't mind, I'll go first. Thanks, first of all, for giving us the opportunity to be here. When I got the invitation, I felt really excited about that because I'm always happy to be talking about my job, but I'm even more happy to be doing this to this audience. And if I can inspire any single female talent to go in there and get a little bit more of what I have, I will be really, really happy. So thanks, Helen. I'm Valeria Loretti. I'm working for Shell in the research department, and my job title is Delivery Manager Motorsport. That means that I am leading the team of talents that are behind all the products that Shell develops, blends and supplies to all our motorsport partners. Above all, obviously, the innovation partnership with Scuderia Ferrari in the Formula One bed. I am a chemist by background. I'm Italian, and I studied in Italy and then moved to Germany for my PhD. So when I started working for the industry, I was really happy to be joining Shell because they have a very big research department on products, fuels and oils and automotive application products, which is slowly evolving, obviously, given that the world is also changing. We have a lot of talents in e-mobility and alternative fuels, biofuels, synthetic fuels, and being in motorsport is really a privileged position because motorsport for us is an innovation test bed, is an area where we can really put our products to the limit and test them possibly on the fastest laboratory of the world. So that is really where innovation and technology leadership happens.
Great, thank you so much for joining us. And Lucy, what's your role?
Yep, so hi, I'm Lucy and I'm a trackside technologist for BP Castrol, working in the Alpine garage. So I'm sort of the end user. So what Valeria talked about the blending and everything else, I'm the person at the track who basically has a mobile laboratory and I test the fuel and lubricants in the Alpine car. So yes, I'm sort of like the end user, if you like, and I'm basically testing for like legality checks from the FIA or to do with looking at the condition of the engine or the gearbox, just making sure that the car's working the way it should be. My actual background, so I actually did my degree in environmental geology, so a bit random, even though this is more of a chemistry-based job. And I actually started my life out at Shell, so I actually used to work with Valerias, so we know each other very, very well, which is really great to see her. And then, yeah, so I worked with Shell and the Ferrari partnership for a while, and then I progressed on to BP, and where I worked with McLaren, and now I'm at Alpine. So yeah, so this is my sort of 14th season in total, so I've been around quite a while. And yeah, it's just really great to be part of this and kind of really promote that women in STEM, women getting into motorsport, and just kind of like, yeah, it's something I wholly support, obviously. So really great to be here.
And it's brilliant that you've given up your evening for this. I know you're both incredibly busy, and especially before we get into the beginning of the Formula One season and we go testing. So we'll kind of split the session up into two halves. We'll talk more about the technical aspect of your roles, and then we'll go into how you got into Formula One. So Lisa, I guess I want to ask you, what on earth happens over a Grand Prix weekend? When do you get to the track? What do you do at the track? And what do you do during the sessions as well?
Yeah, so basically a lot of people obviously only see the race weekend, so they see from sort of like Friday through to the Sunday. I actually arrive in location on the Monday and go to work on the Tuesday, and that's when we start setting up the lab. We have to make sure everything's working. Obviously everything gets flown around the world, so we've got to make sure that all our instruments are working. And then we start off with the fuel. So we start looking at the drums. So the drums get shipped out. We test them to make sure they pass our quality control check. And then from then on, the drums are approved, and then they're released to Alpine, and then they put them into their cooling rigs. We test them also, and then it eventually goes into the car for the fire ups on Thursday. Alongside that, we're also doing a lot of the oil testing. So again, quality control checks on the engine oil, gear oil, and hydraulic fluid. We also do some on the dielectric fluid as well for the MGUK. And then when it actually gets to the race weekend, it's more about the engine oil analysis, or the oil analysis, if you like. So we're looking for wear metals within the oil, and what we're looking for is any anomalies, so anything that looks unusual. If we see something that looks unusual, we go and tell Alpine straight away, and they decide whether they need to change a component within the engine or swap out the gearbox and things like this. And obviously at the moment it's more important because gearbox and engines and hydraulic systems have to last longer. So it's all about kind of making sure that they're getting that protection, and we're not seeing anything unusual. We also are potentially waiting for the FIA to come along and do some testing. So they come along completely at random and will test us, usually at least once during a race weekend. It used to be always fuel, but now they also do the oil analysis as well. And what they're checking for is to make sure our fuel is what it says it is. So that's why we do all the quality control checks at the beginning of the week. And then we're just waiting for them to come and test us. What it can mean is, say, for instance, they tested us after qualifying and we had illegal fuel in the car. The cars will be put to the back of the grid for Sunday. And then if they're tested after the race, it means disqualification if it means there's the fuel's illegal. So yeah, so basically it's basically all about quality control and making sure our fuel is what we say it is. I also have some random little jobs as well. I do the pit board as well for one of the drivers on the Sunday, and other things that Alpine need a hand with, because they try to utilize everybody that's technical within the garage. So they give me extra jobs to do. So yeah, so it's a really busy sort of week, to be fair, from start to finish. And then on a Sunday night, everything that we set up all week, we pack down in 6 hours. So it's a very, very crazy Sunday night to kind of get out of there ready for the next race, especially when you've got those double and triple headers. So that's when it gets really kind of push on the Sunday night.
Very busy indeed. And you mentioned a mobile lab. What is that, and where on earth is it?
So for my setup, we actually have two different setups. For the European races, we have a lab that's actually based in one of the trucks. They have the engineering trucks that sit inside the paddock, and we take up part of the bottom floor of one of those. And that's obviously a nice bit of space. It's air conditioned and it's perfect as a lab. But obviously when we go to flyaways, we don't have that. We don't have the trucks. So we have actually what looks like a wardrobe on wheels, I suppose, like a cupboard. And in that we have all our instruments, same instruments, just a lot more compact. And that actually sits inside the garage. So behind where you see the cars sat, behind there's loads of rooms, and in there you'll have like the gearbox department, the engine department. I'm normally sat next to the engine guys because I work very closely with them. And yeah, that's where you'll find me.
Great, that's so cool that you have this mobile unit that goes around the world with you.
Yeah, shipped everywhere. Yeah, basically.
And Valeria, this may be a very simple question, but what is the difference between the fuels, oil and lubricants, and what different roles do they play in Formula One?
Oh, well, I could speak for hours trying to explain everything and thing. So let me keep it simple. The fuel delivers the performance. So the fuel is really what keeps the engine go and what feeds the engine. In Formula One, fuel is very much regulated, and it is thought really to be very much close to what motorists can buy at retail stations. So overall is I always use this analogy. It's like buying a dress just made by a tailor right for yourself, so it will fit perfectly your body. This is what we developed for Ferrari, and in comparison to what you get at the retail station, that would be a dress that you can buy at a big retail store. So it's something that more or less fits it can be okay for you, but it's not really exactly designed for yourself. The same procedure happens when we design fuel for our partner. We really work hand in hand with engineers in the factory Maranello, and we work with them on several stages of co-engineering, co-development. What we want to understand is how the power unit is working, what is the appetite, where is that the chemistry of the fuel can really make a difference and unlock that extra horsepower that could really mean an overtaking, a podium, or an extra position in the grid. And to do so, we use digital models, we use our laboratory technicians, we have a lot of rigs, and obviously we are supported by our partner, Scuderia Ferrari. They do all the engine tests. And it is really a development work that works in quick feedback loops. We try a couple of formulations, we get the response of the engine, and we improve that. The challenge of this is that they're never happy. Obviously, they want the best of the best of the best, and we also want to deliver the best of the best. We're a team, and we really want to be first. So this is what keeps us going, but it's also the big challenge of being in here. The oil on the other side is, again, an analogy, is like the blood in the engine, is what goes through all the parts of the power unit. The key goals of the engine oil are around lubricating. Obviously, you want to keep these metal parts working once against each other without creating any wear, without damaging, without gripping. And in the oil, the engine oil also helps in cooling the whole power units. Obviously, you can imagine during a Grand Prix at the speed and the power and the output that they are put, the oil needs to be quite resistant. And it has a protection function. Obviously, there are a limited number of power units for each season. And the key element is really that you need to make sure that the engine arrives compact and impact at the end of the race. So you really want to finish the race. So all of these functions are completed by what is in the oil, what does it make it work. So again, the chemistry, the components, the balance of that is really optimized to get the most out of the formulation. And the engine oil also helps in improving the efficiency of the engine. And this is a very important factor because obviously you have a limited amount of fuel. If your engine doesn't work efficiently, again, you won't finish the race, and that's what we want. Then you have a number of other products. You have ERS fluid, you have hydraulic fluid, you have greases. All of them are giving different contributions, but again, the design, the setup, the molecules, and the chemistry which is inside is really optimized for that specific application, for this specific car design, engine power unit design, to extract the highest performance and the highest efficiency.
That's really interesting, and it just shows what an integral part fuel and lubricants play in Formula One. Lucy, can you tell me a bit about how many sample tests you run over a weekend, and what equipment do you use in your lab?
So over the weekend, well, I wasn't prepared for this. It's got quite a lot. So sample testing, all in all, it could probably, well, engine oil, we used to say sort of like 40, 50, and then fuel was less. It depends how many drums you send out and things like this. But then, so with the actual stuff in the lab, the actual equipment, so we have an RDE, which basically is, that's the oil analyzer. It's got a very long name, rotating disc electrode optical emission spectroscopy. So it's a spectrometer, and basically what it's looking at is it looks at the light wavelengths of all the different metals. And yeah, it's just got some very, basically it burns the oil, and it works at something like 5,000 degrees Kelvin. So it's super, super hot, burns the oil in this plasma, and then it's got some opticals that can pick up those, a bit like a prism, I suppose, splits up all the light wavelengths, and then the more intense the light, the more of a certain metal is in there, because each metal has a certain wavelength. We also do things like, for the oil analysis, we do infrared. That's more to check things like leak detection and things like that. then on the fuel side, we have the GC, which is gas chromatography. And gas chromatography is a bit like, so each fuel has its own individual fingerprint. So what we're doing is when we arrive there, we know what our fingerprint from our pre-approved FIA fuel sample looks like. We check that against all the drums, the cooling samples and the fire up samples that we talked about. And then we know everything in that car is nice and clean. And then what we're looking for is basically any contamination that's got in there. So it's not anything sinister. I think it dates back many, many years, the fuel analysis from the FAA side. It goes back to sort of Nigel Mansell era. They decided, what are we actually putting in those F1 cars? And they actually looked into it, and I think they tested some of the fuel and they were like, it's nothing like what you can get on the road. So that's why they brought in the mandate around the European standard for fuel. So yeah, so basically, yeah, we're just checking that it still meets all those rules. It still looks exactly the same, that fingerprint, and then the FIA test it, and as long as it looks the same. The thing with the testing is that, so something like, we talked about grease being in the car. If a bit of grease had got into the fuel, that could actually make it illegal. Say if the mechanic had grease on his gloves and that got into the fuel cell, or maybe if, so sometimes if you blend a new batch of fuel, because we're always looking for that in performance, and you have fuel A and fuel B, and they mix together, and actually that mixture can be deemed illegal within a certain percentage tolerance. So it's things like that. So say, for instance, at one race we had one fuel, and then at the next race we bring a new fuel. You just make sure you flush everything properly. You see anything that looks slightly unusual, you say, no, flush it through again. We always send plenty of fuel to make sure we can do ample flushing just in case, and then we know everything's good to go.
Yeah, that's really interesting. We've had a question on the chat that asks, what happens if an oil drum or another component is contaminated and doesn't pass the test? What are sort of the protocols, and what are the warning signs of that?
Yeah, so as I say, we just check this fingerprint. Say, for instance, on a drum, that what we would do with the drum, because we send enough drum for flushings and things like this, what we would do is just quarantine that. We would quarantine that drum. So excuse me. We usually would have enough. Say, for instance, there were several. This has never happened, but there were several drums that was a problem. We would have to then ship more fuel out. But obviously, we tend to send the fuel like several weeks in advance, so it's there waiting for us when we arrive. So there's no logistical issues. With a actual fuel sample in the rig, for instance. So say, for instance, sometimes it happens when they've sent the rig off to get serviced, and then they've used a different calibration gasoline in there. We've had that in the past where we'll see it and then we'll just go, yep. Usually one flush is ample, but sometimes you got a little bit of a hangover from it, so you just go, right, flush it through again, give me another sample, and you just work through like that. It's very methodical, but yeah, it's basically so that on the Thursday, everything's good to go, so that by the time the car leaves the garage on the Friday morning, that's when everything basically goes into scrutineering. So that's when they can test anytime from a Friday morning. So we basically have to make sure Thursday, that's when everything's good to go.
Great, it's really interesting. And Valeria, I know that the FIA has really strict standards as to fuels, and fuels used to be able to be changed throughout the season a lot more. But what are the rules now regarding fuels, and how many times can you change the makeup of that fuel?
Oh, no, it's very, very simple. It's not going to happen for the next couple of years.
No.
So in the past, the kind of regulations have been evolving. So if you look back at the 80s, what these cars were using, something like rocket fuel, was really half explosive, and it was delivering a lot of power, but it was also a safety concern. So it was not really what you wanted. And also for us working on the fuel, that wasn't really this innovation platform that we want, because we really would like to try out new chemistries, new elements, and then whatever works on the track, we really try to take over and implement on road products. That's where the value comes out for us. And nowadays, the race fuel, Shell V-Power race fuel, is 99% the same component types as the road fuel. So it's so similar, but at the same time, it's really, really tight regulated. So a couple of years ago, we used to introduce small improvements over the years, 2-3 times, depending on how fast the development was going. on 2020, because of pandemic, we had some extra restrictions and we wanted to save money, and the season was a bit compromised. So it was everything a little bit upside down. And last year, we had just one fuel for the whole season. This year, we have worked on the next generation fuel. So long story short, we have gone through always prolonged times that the fuel is now needed to stay the same. That means for us as the developers, we really to get everything the best we have in one shot. We don't have any adjustments opportunities. And for what happens now in March 2022, there are new fuel formulations. They contain for the first time ethanol, which is a biocomponent. Is something very simple that is also present in road fuels. Many countries in Europe have 5% of ethanol. It's called E5, 10%. All over the world, this is a very well-known blending component, and it's really good because the ethanol we're using is second generation, so is something that has a very, very lower impact in greenhouse gas emissions. This fuel is going to stay from March 2022 until the new power unit generation is born, and that likely to be 2025 or maybe 2026 is going to see the matched launch of a new power unit and a new fuel. And the goal of the FIA is, again, the world is changing. I was saying it before. FIA wants to decarbonize all the motorsport series they're promoting. Formula One obviously is probably the most important, the most visible one. And by that time, the fuel is going to be 100% based on advanced sustainable components. And that means a big, big challenge for us. So we're not just sitting around for 3 years doing nothing. We're actually really putting a lot of effort, a lot of brains, a lot of research at the moment to understand how this fuel can look like, because this is going to be a completely new challenge. An opportunity, a great opportunity for exploring new components and really doing the best for sports, for the competition, keeping the highest performance, highest efficiency, and highest greenhouse gas reduction possible is a new parameter we can compare each other to.
I'm really, really excited about these new rule changes this year, and it even goes down to more to things that we didn't even know about, or perhaps fans don't know about, and that the fuel is changing and it's moving towards a more sustainable goal, which is really important. And then obviously that gives you the opportunity to develop those fuels for road cars, which again,
absolutely,
that's the main part of what you do. Final question for Lucy, just before we move on to more of your journey into Formula One.
Yeah.
Obviously, your work just isn't over the race weekends. What sort of things do you do? When do you come back to the factory? Do you work? Where do you work from during the week? And what activities do you do there?
So I actually just came up from Alpine yesterday. So I live in the northwest of England. However, Alpine are down in Oxfordshire. So I was actually there yesterday. So the Christmas period, a lot of people think, oh yeah, you must have like loads of time off over Christmas. I really do not. So that's when we would send everything back, you know, because obviously I've got two different setups, two different labs, if you like. I basically they get shipped back to the UK, and then I spend all of January and a bit of February basically servicing all the equipment. So obviously as everything's shipped around the world and all vibrations and all this kind of thing, and just generally getting a bit knocked about, and these instruments are obviously meant to be kept in like a nice air-conditioned lab in the same place, not moved around, and so they have quite a lot of wear and tear. We do take out a lot of spares with us. We take out like a spare oil analyzer and things like this, just in case we have something fail when we're in Australia and we can't get anything shipped out straight away. So we do have to take contingency plans with us, but we get everything serviced right now, basically. So that's, and then obviously now and then working through the rest of the season, a lot of the time in between races, we do obviously have a bit of downtime because, you know, while we're away, we work sort of 70-hour weeks, which is a lot. So we do get quite a bit of time off in between races, but there's things like booking travel. I have to book all my own travel, or I get help from the Alpine travel office to help do that. There's a lot of things now, especially with the pandemic and around actually doing a lot of forms and a lot of visas and things like this. So yeah, there's been a lot of that changing, and obviously with, you know, Brexit and stuff as well, we've got to do a lot more visas and things as well. So that's where there's been a lot more of that kind of organisation around travel. So yeah, so you're still kept really quite busy. in between races and definitely now. I kind of hit the ground running first week back in Jan, so I only had like 2 weeks off over Christmas. So
very busy indeed.
Mhm.
We've had a question in from Eleanor, and she says, "Are you the only person on your team that does that? That does what you do, or do you have a colleague? How many people do BP Castrol send to a race weekend?"
I am it. So yes, I am the person. However, I do have 2 colleagues who swap in and out for a couple of races just to give me a bit of a respite. You know, as it's moving towards, we have a couple of winter tests. We usually have an end of season test. There's sometimes a test in the middle of the season, and then there's 23 races. The FIA want to make it up to 25 races. That is a big pull on your life. And especially because, you know, I'm there for a full 8 days usually. So I've actually got some colleagues that are, they're going to take, I think it's something like 4 or 5 races off me, I think. And so they're going to go to a mixture of Europeans and flyaways just to kind of give me a bit of a respite throughout the season. They'll both be at the winter testing with me just to kind of go through anything that's changed over the close season. We've updated some of our processing software and things like this. So just to kind of give them a bit of a refresher because they're not doing it as often as I am. And then we'll hit the ground running in Bahrain, basically.
You've got a long season ahead.
A very long season.
At Shell, we do have a kind of a different setup. We always have 2 analysts that go out at each race, and we have a wider team. So these people are rotating, because Lucy's saying she's perfectly right. It takes a toll on your personal life. And I've not been to too many races because of pandemic constraints, but our ideal setup is really to have 2 analysts and a manager, really to take care of everything that goes around in and out, the sample analysis, and also our stakeholder management. It obviously is a great opportunity to meet up with the rest of the team and really discuss those topics that you don't really do in a proper way when you're on video calls and things. So it is much more than being in the lab and at the races. Is really a kind of a different setup of your office. So
yeah, and obviously these roles that you have in Formula One, they're very, very niche. You said that you studied in Italy before going to Germany to do your PhD. What did you study, and how did you end up in Formula One?
Well, I studied chemistry, so it was regular chemistry, and my thesis and PhD thesis was around analytical chemistry. So I was looking at analytical methods, refining them, specifying them for something that was completely different from what we do in Formula One. Obviously, that gives you the basics. It gives you the basics around methods. Whatever Lucy mentioned before was part of my study journey, and it gives you also the kind of a mindset around troubleshooting, around being eager to learn more, not being, you know, it's part of my character as well. I'm never happy enough. I really want to go the next step. I want to try something new. I want to get outside of my comfort zone. And this has been also my driver. Obviously, as a chemist, if you want to not to undertake the academic journey and career, and you want to go into the industry, there are some areas which are pretty standard, so like cosmetics or pharma or energy companies. And this was really interesting for me because I really like to be involved in projects that look at products that are very close to the customer. So having had the opportunity over my 15 years at Shell to be working, you know, on developing differentiated fuels or differentiated lubricants and all these things gave me really the satisfaction about working on something that is readily available to somebody and has a practical use. And that was what kept me going. So I skilled myself up. I spent all these 15 years in technical roles. And I also had the opportunity to build on my own strengths. So beside of the academic background and the experience that you can make in an industry by managing different projects and learning around different products, I could really find roles that were fitting my personality. I'm quite communicative. I like interacting with people. As I said, I like learning about new areas and new stuff. And I had a lot of interface roles where I was, representing the technical part of Shell and interacting with other parts of the business, for example, for launching differentiated fuels. And this is really important because gave me the opportunity to learn a lot around different business areas, around different applications. What is it happening in supply chain? What is happening at depots? How fuels are blended? How are they distributed? And all of these elements were then good knowledge that I could use when I had the opportunity to go and run for this role. This role is something that came up in a window of opportunity, which was really okay for me. So I was looking for a new job within the company, and I had the seniority to go and apply for that, because obviously you need a little bit of skills around managing people, around knowledge on communication and stakeholder management, a solid technical background, and I happened to have all the right skills at the right moment. But I also was really striving to get this role. So I knew that at Shell we have a motorsport team. I knew what it takes to be there, and I have to say, strategically, I was working for these over the last 5 to 10 years. So it was really a dream of mine to be here. And now all the personal, professional skills elements, they were all fitting together, and I went for it and I got it. If I can add on the personal side, I've always been an F1 fan. So that is, let's say, an additional plus, is something I always need to take control of, because obviously you don't want to turn up as the professional, the Shell face, and then go, oh, that's a banana. But it needs to be a good balance between your own personality, your own passion, and your professional side. But obviously is a big motivator to be able to be there.
Absolutely. It's great that you've been able to follow your dream, and you're a testament that hard work and determination can get you to where you want to be. So it's brilliant to hear that story. What about you, Lucy? Have you always liked Formula One? Obviously, you've been at a couple of teams now. How did you end up at Alpine?
So basically for me, I wasn't a massive fan of motorsport growing up. I had an uncle that used to work at WRC, so we used to watch that a lot as children. However, F1 really wasn't on my radar, and it was one of those, kind of, I just picked A levels and a degree that I enjoyed. So I enjoyed geography, geology, environmental science. Went on to do a degree in it. And then throughout, you're obviously always thinking about, what am I going to do at the end of uni? What am I going to do? And where I lived in the northwest, there was the big Shell oil refinery, and there's a research place next door. And I was looking for work experience between my second and third year at uni, and I managed to secure some at Shell. They had quite a push on having people in who were A-level students or doing their degrees and coming in and doing work experience. So I managed to, I think it was 3 weeks unpaid work experience, and I really enjoyed it. And it was working in the microscopy lab at the time. And so I stayed in touch with the guy who was kind of my mentor. And I basically just kept in touch and was like, oh, do you think any chance of a job after uni? Kind of putting some feelers out, a bit of networking. And he put me in touch with Murray Brown, who was at the time, he was in charge of the whole of the analytical department in that research area, in that research site, sorry. And so as it got towards sort of like me finishing my degree, that end of that third year, I said, is there anything? And he said, oh, you can actually come in. We needed a little bit more help. You can go back into the microscopy department and you can do a summer job. And I was like, perfect. So I went in on agency, did a summer job, and it got to the end of that. And I worked really hard and I thought, great, I've got Shell on my CV. That's amazing. And then it's just by chance they do these year in industry students where they take a year out in between their second and third year at uni and they do a year placement somewhere. And there was one space free because someone was a no-show or decided not to go for it with Shell. So they said, right, well, we need to fill that role. So are you happy to move labs and actually, take their place? And I was like, oh, 100% yes. So I stayed on agency for an extra year, but they moved me into the elemental lab. Now, the elemental lab was a very good stepping stone or basis for what we do trackside on the oil side. So I stayed there. I worked hard, really, really enjoyed it. It was a great kind of first step into industry, if you like. And then it was coming to the end of that year, and I was like kind of looking for jobs, and I was even I applied for really random things like the RAF and random stuff like this, because I wanted something really where I travelled. So, and I knew the motorsport job existed, but I didn't think there was a way in. And then it was just by chance, one of the guys was thinking about leaving and moving away from the trackside role. And they said, okay, there'll be a trackside. So Murray, the man in charge, was like, would you be interested? And I was like, yeah, I would. So I applied for it and I got it. And that secured me my full shell contract and then started my career in Formula One at the age of 22. I then stayed in the trackside team. So I started off part-time, used to do a lot of trips out to Maranello to service the equipment, and then did maybe like 5 races a season. And then over time, I moved up into the main analyst role where I did sort of like 12, 13 races a season. And then I did that for several years. I then actually decided to move out of F1 for personal reasons. However, I ended up moving to Hamburg, and that's where I met Valeria and got to know her properly, and worked in Valeria's team in the fuels. And it was a good job. It was great experience. It was a lot of diesel development. So it was got a lot of sort of like project management, coordination, things like this. And it was great experience, but it wasn't really me, if that makes sense. I'd also worked a little bit on the Shell Eco Marathon. That was great fun and I really enjoyed that, but it made me realise I missed F1. The Shell Eco Marathon is a student competition that they do and you get to travel a bit with it, and I was like, oh, but I do miss F1. And then basically BP were looking for a experienced person because they were going back into F1 after many years out of the sport, and so they approached me, and then that's how I ended up moving to BP. And that was in 2017. And then I went straight into full-time travel. So I was basically doing the whole season to start with, and then they brought in these backup people to kind of help out. So it's, yeah, as I say, this will be my, I think, 14th season, something like this. So I've done it a long time on and off. I obviously had a few years hiatus in the middle. But yeah, it's just, it's either something you either enjoy or don't. I think it's such a disruptive job to your life that you either have to love it or sort of hate it. It's a bit like Marmite. Lots of my colleagues say, oh, I could never do it because of the fact they're away from home for so long. But as 22 years old going in, it was just so exciting and so amazing. And you got to see the world. It was such a great feeling. And yeah, it's still there. Like it comes to the start of the season, you're walking on that plane and it's like, here we go again for another season sort of thing. So yeah.
It's really nice to hear that it hasn't lost its magic and that you still get excited.
Yeah, for sure.
Valeria, obviously your role is a little bit different. What sort of things what are you responsible for trackside, and what are your responsibilities there?
Well, let's say I'm the person accountable for everything to go well. So normally on race weekend, I have my phone with me, and as long as it doesn't ring, I'm happy. In principle, I am really accountable for leading the team. So that means making sure that the people that are in the role of Lucy, so our analyst, but also the others, we have a really end-to-end team for Formula One. So we have the analyst, and for me, it's really important that they are really okay with what they do, show the same enthusiasm as Lucy's doing, so they're really buying into this role because it's biting into the personal life. They know what they're doing, they stay safe, they have a very good professional skill set, they really do a good job. I mean, the quality of the whole analysis is really fundamental because the product needs to be perfectly okay. The job of our analysts is not very different from what Lucy does. So they do analyze all the products. They are there to make sure that they catch early signs for malfunction, but also to ensure that the quality is the required one. And they need to have the right skills, to have the right mindset, to be able to work with a little bit of less tools, less people around them, but really still face any potential situation, be able to troubleshoot, to find new ideas to solve a solution that they have never been facing before. So my role is really to make sure that they have all the tools and all the skills to make their job, to stay safe, and also to support them in doing this. So I'm not a boss that goes there and checks everything. I'm more really like listening to the people and making sure that they have the right tools and go off and do their job in the best way they want. So we're clear on the goal. The way they follow to get there is their own opportunity. And in this way, people really grow. So that's, again, my accountability as a team leader. I need to make sure I identify those areas where people are shining and help them understanding them and follow their passions, their strengths, really building on them to progress in their role in their career and grow in as a professional figure. In our team, we don't have only analysts, we have really people in the operational area. So we have fuel blenders, oil blenders, we have laboratory technicians. They all are within our team. And even though they have different tasks and work on a different schedule, the most important thing are really the same basics. So they are skilled and they know what they're doing, and they can really progress and become even better in what they're doing, and then maybe step up into the next role. I also have a team of formulators and developers. They're really key because they are those guys doing the science, the ideation, so that they're the brains behind all the products. And these professional figures are normally very, very skilled and experienced persons that have a lot of experience with formulation. They understand the chemistry, they understand combustion chemistry, and they know how the chemistry works in the engine. So this engine fuel and engine oil interaction is really the key and the soft spot that we need to leverage. Their work is much more based in the office because they work more on project basis, but they also, again, this element that I really loved in the job is being very close to the final product, working on a daily basis with your customer, your partner. That is also where they really need to be present. So we have regular exchanges with Maranello staff. We have a lot of meetings and workshops and ideation sessions really to go and grab something new and squeeze out of the brains new ideas. And so there is a little bit of trouble in this. And also we at Shell, we really like to talk about what is the innovation partnership. So it's not a sponsorship, is really not just a sticker on the side of the car. It is around the science behind it. And that is where we really like to leverage also our talents. And we use our scientists as spokespersons, just like what I'm doing. We talk about our work and we explain what's behind it, what is the work which is we're doing and how we're doing it. And normally all these guys are really passionate. So that's what really works really well. And I have also logistic experts in my team. Also, it is really, really important that the product you've been working on over the last year arrives at the right time at the track. So there is no error opportunity. So it is really fundamental that the logistic works, and we have a lot of manpower behind that. Organizational skills. So it's a very diverse team, but you see the common denominator is really this knowledgeability around the products, a very strong commitment for a close collaboration with our partners, and a passion for what they're doing.
I think just to follow on from what V was saying, I know I said at the track, I'm essentially, there's literally me and my two other colleagues that swap in and out. But obviously I'm not an oil formulator. I don't know about that. So if I ever have issues or anything like this, what Valeria was saying about having your phone on a race weekend, that's quite normal, because obviously I've got a team behind me who actually sit back at base in the UK. And if I've ever got an issue, I go back to them and say, well, not an issue, but as someone comes and asks a question, can you tell me the properties of this or X, Y, and Z? And I'm like, well, I don't know that because I didn't formulate the oil, or I didn't, blend this or do whatever. So you've always got someone on hand who's going to answer back straight away, and it's quite good that you've constantly got that dynamic. Unfortunate for them, because usually it's a Saturday or a Sunday, and I'm going, can you help me with this, please? And the same with the logistics. It's the logistical feat around F1, and we're only a small part of it with the fuel and oil side, but just to get our fuel and oil there and to make sure it clears customs in time so that it's there for the race week, basically, it's a huge feat. So yeah, we have kind of all of those people on tap, ready and waiting to help, sort of thing. So it is such a huge effort. It's not just like a couple of people that you see at the track. It's a huge amount of manpower that you have behind it. And as you say, you're constantly then feeding and having this dialogue with the engineers at the track from Alpine or Ferrari or whatever, and you have that kind of great relationship, and it's a really great way to work.
Yeah, I don't know, maybe Lucy, you can confirm this, but I think one of the most great aspects of Formula One is this team spirit. You're really part of a bigger team. You know what is your role, you know what you're doing, and you know what others are doing. It's like a big engine working, so everyone is a little part of it.
Yeah.
And the best you can work with your colleagues and your partners, the best the output. So everyone fevers together, everyone is happy together, everyone is desperate together when things don't go great, but it's always being together and supporting each other. So it's a great team spirit.
Yeah, it is like a family. It's they say it, but it is like a traveling family. Basically, you're all in this together, and especially when, for me personally, with my job being at the track and everything else, you do all those long hours. You have, you know, your 70-hour weeks and stuff, and you go through all the trials and tribulations and but also when you do get an amazing like podium and things like this, the celebrations, it's like an amazing feeling, but you go through it all together and everybody feels it. It's just such an amazing, passionate environment that like I haven't experienced in other parts that I've worked in, if that makes sense. It's, you see, you know, the results you see on track are like instant job satisfaction if you get a great result. So it's, you know, it really works.
Oh, that's great to hear. Just to everybody that is tuning in, we've got about just over 10 minutes left. So if you have any questions, please do ask them, and we will do our best to get through them. I want to ask about the key qualities that you need to have in your role. Obviously, you talked about how demanding it is, how busy you are. What are those soft skills that are really important to be successful in Formula One?
Do you want me to answer this? Go first?
We'll hear from you first, and then Valeria.
Yep. I think you need to have basically just a good work ethic. You've got to be there and give your all, sort of thing, when you're at the track. So you have to have you have to be flexible as well. You have to be flexible with the fact that you might have to work extra hours. You can't just I have breaks at this time and things like this. You have to have that flexibility around you. Coordination skills, you are basically, for me, I book my own travel, so you have to kind of ship yourself around the world, as well as working with a logistics person to help ship your product around. I think, and things like time management and things like this as well. I'm trying to think off the top of my head, but I think, yeah, I think it's just about the work ethic more than anything. Because I think as long as it does take over your life, you have to commit quite a lot. Especially, so, you might be lucky where you only do half the races, and then you do get a bit more of a respite and a bit more of a work-life balance. But if you do all the races, obviously you're committing quite a lot of your downtime to this. So I think if you're flexible and you feel like this is for you, then it's quite a commitment, but it's a great experience.
And how do you balance the work family life balance? Obviously everything has to get put on hold for Formula One. How do you juggle it?
I think it depends on the person. So some people obviously go home in between every race, and that's fine. Something that I used to do, and Valeria knows this very well, I used to just travel a lot. So I would sometimes go away for like 9 weeks, and I would literally go race somewhere different, and then a race, and then somewhere else, and I would do that instead, because that was what I wanted to do. Now, but with COVID, it's taught me to slow down a little bit. Obviously everything's kind of stopped, so I think I'm appreciating home life a lot more, so I will come home a lot more. But then when I come home, sometimes I get a full week off, and then I get to do things, and it's nice. So I you just make sure you balance out, and you take as well those opportunities where you can, if you do want to do something or see something. So for instance, Australia's on the cards, might go out to Australia a little bit early just to have a nice weekend in Melbourne beforehand. I don't know, but these are things, like you're seeing all of a sudden the world's opening up again, and you're like, oh, I maybe get to see some amazing things, so why not?
And with new races, there's always a possibility to explore new territory.
Exactly, 100%.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Am I anybody?
I know. Amazing.
So for me, the skill that it takes, obviously being such a big team with different roles, if you want to work in Formula One, you need to understand what are your strengths, what do you really want, and what you're good at, and where do you want to go. For me, that was really key to understand what I want to be, more or less in which kind of timeline, and strategically work for that. So I think a very important skill is, as Lucy said, to be flexible. Obviously, sometimes things work out, sometimes not, but every experience is some place to learn something. So it gives you definitely some new learning, some new expertise. And what I could recommend is really have a clear objective and work really hard for that. Remain yourself, stay authentic. If there are some areas where you're not excellent in, then don't absolutely work against that. Just work where you're good, where you're strong, and where you can be even better and really, really shine above others. So and for the family balance, that was an important element for me. So I'm a bit older than Lucy, and I decided to work for this role in a later stage of my life. So I didn't start as soon as I could with Formula One. That was, let's say, on my objective list, but for a bit later. And I wanted to use the first part of my life to dedicate more to the family. So that's where I skilled myself up, did a lot more of office-based jobs. And I have now 2 teenage boys. So the less I'm home, the happier they are.
They can go and cause havoc when you're away. Obviously, Formula One is a very male-dominated sport, and we're very, very lucky that obviously we have 2 female representatives in this call tonight, and in such a niche area of Formula One as well. And then we've also got Stephanie Travers, who was at Mercedes Petronas as well. So it's really great that we have some pioneering women in this aspect. Did that ever cross your mind when going into the industry that you are kind of an odd one out, or has that only spurred you on to work harder and be the best that you can be?
Shall I go first?
Yes, you go first.
I have to say, I'd never felt that I've been biased or treated differently because of the fact that I'm a woman. But I was always judged as a professional and based on my skills, my experience, and what I can do. That's why it is so important really to work hard and remain yourself. I may have been lucky, but I think we are pioneers, you're right, but we're more and more. So actually, guys, there is no reason why there should be more men than women in this area and anywhere. So I think we really need to stand up, and I'm really proud to be an example and possibly an inspirational model. I mean, I want other girls and women to see you can do it. You just have to want it and stand up and work hard for that. Go and get it.
Yeah, agreed. I think I've never, I don't ever feel like I've been judged. It's not been a level playing field. However, I've maybe put a bit of pressure on myself to maybe try and prove myself, but that's like a personal thing, I think. But when I first started, it's back when I was 20, you're talking 15 years ago, gosh, no, maybe more than that. But when many years ago, when I first started, there was definitely a lot less, especially the technical women's side. There was literally, I could probably count them on one hand. Now there is still, don't get me wrong, it's definitely male dominated, but you can see them popping up more and more female mechanics, more female pit crew, more female engineers. So this is really great to see. But one interesting thing, and this is a story that Stephanie told me actually, was that she saw an article that I was in when I was at Shell, and she was like, I want that job. And then she ended up doing it. And I was like, and she told me that it made me feel really old because, she's a lot younger than me. And she saw the article and I was like, oh my gosh. But then at the same time, I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. And it inspired one person to follow that dream. And I was like, well, that's really cool. She wanted to be in motorsport. She'd always had a passion for it and everything else. So I think it's really great to hear that things like this are actually reaching out to people, girls who want to get into STEM, girls who want to get involved in motorsport, because it's a great job to have. It's an amazing thing to do. And I think, it needs to be more of a level playing field. It's getting there for sure. But it would be lovely to see more and more come through in the next few years for definite. So.
But I think there are a lot of initiatives, a lot of activities going in this direction.
A lot more around it.
And I'm really happy to see more and more, to be able to talk about that, to be able really to inspire, to motivate, to push. In my team lead role, obviously, I'm a role model for younger colleagues, and this is where I really go and talk to everyone I can, really, to let them think what you want, you can have. Really, there is no glass ceiling. There is no limitation to what we can do. If you have the skills, if you have the wit, take it. And I think this is really the right way. It may take time, but we've done already a lot of progress, and I'm sure that year after year there will be more and more women in every technical and motorsport area, and that is just it's just moving, and we have just to push it harder and harder.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah, visibility is absolutely key, and this is why it's so important to have this conversation that we've had tonight with two fantastic role models. So thank you again both for sharing your stories. Let's finish off with some fun quick fire questions, shall we? Yeah. I want to know, Lucy, what has been your favorite race that you have worked at?
Ever? Oh gosh. Oh, I think, do you mean track, or do you mean just favorite place in general?
Let's go for favorite because of what happened on track, and also favorite because of the location.
So what happened on track? 100% Hungary last year. We got our first place, and that is my first place in a very, very long time. And it was the most amazing feeling, being down at the podium, like everybody like screaming, and like, you know, being on the pit wall, because I do the pit board during the Sunday. So I was like holding the pit board saying like first place, and it was such an amazing feeling. So yeah. And what was the other question?
What's your favorite track location to go to?
I really like some of the long haul ones. Austin's amazing. Great food, great live music, and yeah, the Americans are always fun. Like great atmosphere. Melbourne's great. It's such a beautiful city. Singapore. Track wise though, I do have a really special place for Belgium and Austria. Great tracks, great locations, beautiful scenery. A bit rainy in Belgium, but I like it. I think it's lovely and fresh. Alpine even. So, but yeah, so lovely.
And what about the most logistically challenging? Obviously, the heat can be quite tough. So
yeah, Saudi was that was really difficult, and I think logistically as well, because we'd never travelled to Saudi. Logistics wise, like we had a few problems with freight and things like this. Logistically, also I think a random one, but Mexico, because of the altitude, the car really overheats. So that's, I think, just a challenge on cooling with the car and things like this. I think all teams have that problem. And then what else? I think logistically, yeah. And then I think, as you say, just any ones that are really hot. Singapore with the humidity. And also it's a night race, so that's a bit weird, because you kind of go on to local time and then you go on to night race time, so it kind of gets a bit all over the place, and things like jet lag really start to take their toll. So yeah.
Yeah, what a race Hungary was last year, huh?
It's amazing.
I think I will always remember that.
Amazing race, yeah.
Look at your smile just talking.
Yeah, honestly, it's just great memories. That and Qatar as well, when we got the third place. It was just both magical.
Yeah, fantastic. And Valeria, what about you? What's been your favorite? You're gonna have to say an Italian racetrack now, aren't you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's another thing. It's like your home race. You go home. You're in your own country, speak your own language, and but it's also always the feeling in the Ferrari garage. I have to say, I feel very, very welcome.
Very, very passionate people.
Oh, definitely. But I have to say, last year, particularly, we had a very important event around Zandvoort Grand Prix, so in the Netherlands. It was amazing weather. We were on the beach. The circuit was full of these guys. Obviously, it was not a Ferrari win, but the Dutch fans, they were so passionate that in the end, everybody was happy, whatever. It didn't really matter who was winning, who was not, but it was just a big party. And for me, it was also one of the first opportunities to meet up with a lot of colleagues and people I didn't see over a very long time because of the pandemic constraints. So that was like going back after, you know, living in your own bubble for such a long time, and then meeting up with all these guys and your old friends, your old colleagues, and everybody has something else to tell. And it was, yeah, like a kind of family reunion. So it was really, really nice experience.
And final question for you both. Who's been the favourite Formula One driver that you worked with?
Oh no. Oh. To be fair, the two I've got at the moment are amazing guys, and they are really happy and settled with each other, and it's great. So Fernando and Esteban are a pleasure to work with, and you know, they're really great, and you get nice little fist bumps when they come to the garage. It's great. Another really lovely one though, can't complain, but I also had Carlos and Lando and that little bromance going on, and they were lovely as well. So yeah, I've been quite lucky with the drivers last few years. They've been great. So yeah, but yeah, so it's a very happy garage at the moment where I'm working, so it's lovely.
I can't say anything different. Obviously working with Charles and Carlos, they're such good guys. They're just too young, for God's sake. I feel very, very old. So... but they're so nice and easy and happy to work with anybody. So they're really, really, yeah, well-educated kids.
Kids. Oh. Well, look, thank you so much for joining us both tonight. And for everybody that has tuned in, there is a link to a survey, and you will have also been emailed it. If you could fill it out, you get to have the opportunity to let Girls on Track UK know if you want any particular speakers going forward, or any particular subject. So definitely do fill that in. What's left to say is thank you so much, Valeria and Lucy, for joining us tonight. I have had so much fun learning about your roles, and it is absolutely fantastic what you do.
No problem. It's been great.
Thank
it's been
you
a
so
pleasure.
Much for the great
Thank
time.
You. Yeah.
We wish you the best of luck for the season ahead.
Thank you. Exciting.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Thank you
very much. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.